Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the February 6, 2024 meeting of the Smithfield Town Council to order. This time, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Gibbs.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilman Gibbs. Again, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Smithfield Town Council meeting. It's good to have you here this evening. Major, can you see if the sheets are complete as far as the public comments and things? Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is the informational section. Mr. Michael Stallings.
Yes, sir. Included in your packet was the monthly activity report. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Any questions from council for Mr. Stallings? Okay. They're seeing none. I do not. The next section is the public comment section. That's matters that are not listed on the agenda. And I do not have anyone signed up. Does anyone in the audience wish to be heard on the public comment section? All right, thank you very much. The next two items I have are certificates of appreciation for folks that have done a wonderful job in public service for the town of Smithfield. The first is for Mr. Mike Swecker. Mike couldn't be here with us tonight, but I would like to read the resolution into the record. Resolution of appreciation. Whereas Mr. Michael Swecker, a resident of Smithfield, proudly served the citizens of Smithfield as an appointed official for 13 years. And whereas Mr. Swecker was appointed by Town Council to serve on the Smithfield Planning Commission on January 5, 2010, to fill the expired term of Mr. Tom Hearn. Mr. Swecker served as an appointed official from February 1, 2010 to December of 2023. During this time, he was reappointed to serve in 2014, 2018, and 2022. And whereas during this time, Mr. Swecker demonstrated excellent leadership qualities in local government on the Smithfield Planning Commission with numerous accomplishments to benefit the town of Smithfield. And therefore it be resolved that I, Stephen G. Bowman, Mayor of the town of Smithfield, on behalf of my town council, wish to formally extend to Mr. Swecker on this 6th day of February 2024 our sincere appreciation for his dedication and loyal service to the town of Smithfield as a member of the Smithfield Planning Commission for the past 13 years, and be it further resolved that this resolution will spread upon the permanent records of the town of Smithfield and that a suitable copy thereof be delivered to Mr. Swecker, which I promise I will personally do. So for Mr. Swecker, let's give him a round of applause. The next certificate of appreciation is for Ms. Renee Roundtree. Renee, would you come up, please? It's a resolution of appreciation. Whereas Ms. Renee Roundtree, a resident of Smithfield, proudly served the citizens of Smithfield as an elected official for 3.5 years. And whereas Ms. Roundtree was elected by the citizens of the town of Smithfield to serve a community on May 5th, 2020, she served as a member of the Smithfield Town Council from July 1, 2020 until December 31, 2023. And whereas during this time, Ms. Roundtree demonstrated excellent leadership qualities in local government and numerous accomplishments to benefit the town of Smithfield. And whereas Mrs. Roundtree performed her duties on council while participating as both chairwoman of the Public Safety Committee and chairwoman of the Parks and Recreation Committee during her tenure. Ms. Roundtree also served as a member of the Public Safety Committee, the Public Works Committee, and the Water and Sewer Committee. And therefore it be resolved that I, Stephen G. Bowman, Mayor of the town of Smithfield, on behalf of our town council, wish to formally extend to Mrs. Roundtree on this 6th day of February 2024 our sincere appreciation for her dedication and loyal service to the town of Smithfield as a member of the Smithfield Town Council, and be it further resolved that this resolution will be spread upon the permanent record of the town of Smithfield and that a suitable copy thereof right now will be delivered to Ms. Roundtree. Renee, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours. Congratulations, thank you. And if you would like, you can roll right into the report, since I think you're next on the agenda as far as
Well,
that's concerned.
that was good planning,
I
Mayor
appreciate
Bowman.
it.
Thank you. Great logistics work. This is my first report to you all from the Isle of Wight County Board of Supervisors. It was, first of all, I want to say it was my honor to serve alongside with so many of you the last 3.5 years and to serve the citizens of Smithfield. I enjoyed every minute, maybe not every minute, but most of my minutes while I was on town council. So, Board of Supervisors has kept me busy so far. Everyone said it would, and it has. In fact, I've attended 2 meetings, official meetings, if you will. The first was a work session January 4th, where we elected Mr. Acree, Joel Acree, as the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Don Rossi as the vice chair. We then moved our meeting from a Thursday to a Tuesday and had it on the 16th of January, our regular meeting, where we received our audit report. We did have a few findings in that audit report, so we're working through all of those things. We did receive a legislative briefing and a really nice presentation by Dominion Power on their wind project. So I encourage you, if you're interested in that at all, go back and watch that recording. It was quite good. Then, importantly, the schools participated in the county in a VDOT Paint the Plow program. And I'll have you know that the Smithfield High School plow won every category. So, the popular category as well as the award from VDOT. So great job, Smithfield, in that regard. I then, as a part of my opening remarks, proposed something that I think is very important to the county and to the town of Smithfield, and that's an Isle of Wight County Task Force on Growth. And so I've been spending quite a bit of time talking to people about if that makes sense, including attending a planning commission meeting where I presented to Mr. Gibbs and the other planning commissioners on the 23rd of January about that proposal. So we'll talk about that at our next meeting. I did want to say that I also attended, I'm continuing to attend the Farmers Market, Smithfield Farmers Market meetings. There's an advisory board that I've proudly been on for several years. That meeting was the 30th, and since that time, I think this was sent in an email to you guys today, guys and gals, but our Smithfield Farmers Market is the first to be accredited in a new statewide certification program by the Virginia Farmers Market Association. This was created to encourage best practices among the state's 300 farmers markets. Wow. So out of 300, we are actually the only one to be gold certified, and we are the first one to be gold certified. There's 4 others who have applied, but we're the first one to be awarded that. It's a high honor, and there were 10 areas of categories of operation, including food safety, professional development, food origin identification, equity, and public safety. So there's a lot that goes into that application, and Judy and her team and Sabrina are to be commended for achieving that. January, I also visited Hayden's Village. That was a good field trip. And finally, last evening, the last of my meetings I'll tell you about that I have to report is I attended the Carrollton Civic League meeting. So it was a good group of citizens. They, of course, are concerned with growth and are in favor of the Growth Task Force and studying the inputs and the outputs and modeling of what's to come for our community. And they're also real concerned with traffic. So we talked a lot about that. I have entered the Virginia County Group Board of Supervisors training. So been to my first session, and the first one is on budgeting. So it's very timely. And that's proving to be a great opportunity for networking. Finally, when it gets a little warmer, I received word today from Mr. Keaton that pickleball lines will be painted on the tennis courts near the YMCA here in Smithfield. I know that's something that a lot of my District 1 constituents wanted, and he said once it's warmer, that will be done. Any questions for me?
Any questions by members of the council for, excuse me, Supervisor Roundtree? Well, thank you very much. As far as that task force on growth, please, I know I've read some of the things that, accounts in the paper. Please remember us if you would, because we certainly would like to send someone as far as involvement's concerned in that task force for sure.
Yes, sir. So my current recommendation is to have someone from Smithfield Town Council be appointed to that task force. And I had spoken to you previously, as well as Michael and Mr. Saunders from Windsor. So I think there's quite a bit of support for it.
just working out the logistics, if you will, over the next month, and hope to form that and not step on any toes of any of the planning commissions. Neither of the town planning commissions nor the county should feel threatened at all. I look at it really as a kind of an assist, right? Because in the next year, we'll be working on the next comprehensive plan for the county. And I think this is just a precursor to that. And it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of digging into the minutia of the details, that we have to consider for growth and at the different percentages and what's going on. So I think it's pretty well thought out. We'll see. I'd like to try to have the first report back to the group and to all of our governing bodies by September of this year. So we want to move quickly and work quickly.
It's also a pleasure to have your family with you today.
Oh,
too,
thank
as
you.
well.
I know I
Yeah,
brought
for sure.
a fan club.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Pack, Ms. Rountree, I do have one question for you tonight. You may not be able to answer, and that's okay.
Okay.
Planning Commission has recently, and the county has recently received 2 different studies on the school enrollment. And as planning commissioners, we rely on others' information because they're experts. So we have one survey or one study that the county commission that says we're quickly outgrowing our schools. And then we have another one from UVA's office that says you got plenty of room. Where do we go here? Have you guys looked at that or thought about that or which one we believe?
Right. So Councilman Pack, that's a really good question. There are, in fact, 2 studies. One that was commissioned by the school board and paid for privately, and then another one that the Weldon Cooper study that I think you're referring to. Basically, Weldon Cooper is the accepted, statistical body in the state. In fact, when we completed the comprehensive plan back in 2019, we consulted both them as well as Tischler Bice, which is a national company when we were looking at the comprehensive plan, and they gave us growth rates and students that would matriculate, et cetera. I'm not an expert as to say which one is right and which one is wrong, but you're correct that they say 2 very different things. What I know about the Weldon Cooper study is that we were projected from the years of 2020 to 2040, as far as population goes, to have a 0.8% growth rate, right? And what we've actually experienced as a county over the last 3 years is a 2% growth rate. So we're more than doubled what we thought would happen as far as growth. So I know that the Weldon Cooper Institute and those studies are very well respected.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the study that was commissioned by the schools. Another statistic that I know is that, in the last 20 years, we've only increased enrollment in all the Isle of Wight County schools by about 500. So I would tend to think more along the lines of the Weldon Cooper than the other study. But again, that could be something that the task force looks at to compare those because the consequences are real, right?
Yeah.
And the numbers add up into the M, right? The millions. And it's something we have to get right. It's also part of what I want to look at with this growth task force that I'm proposing, that not all residential areas are created equal, right? So the 55 and older section of Cypress Creek is going to obviously produce not as many students as another neighborhood might, as a Ben's Grant or something like that. So I think we have to get really specific when we're talking about the needs, future needs, upcoming things, and how to, best serve our citizens, which is why I think it bears further study.
Yeah, and so with your task force, when we put them together, if you can kind of challenge them with that, as we have 2 studies, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Correct.
It usually is. But if they could offer some guidance and their opinions and thoughts and research into where to go, that would be very helpful for Planning Commission as we look at other projects that are coming down the road. So, thank you. I'm 100% behind what you're doing. So,
I appreciate that.
any other comments, questions, Ms. Butler?
I do have a question. In reference to the the growth task force,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Bowman said that, we're very much interested, and you said someone would be representing the Smithfield Town Council. I'd like to see more planning commissioners on that task force because that's what their primary job is, and they should have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Councilwoman Butler, the last time I revised the proposal for the growth task force, I had kind of tended to agree with you and said for the town of Windsor and the town of Smithfield, I would leave it up to that body, right, or that town as to whether they wanted to appoint a planning commissioner or a town council member, right? So kind of one or the other, whichever you think is most prudent. I did hear from Mr. Saunders today, And he says he has someone in mind that serves both bodies, right? So that seems to make sense. They have
Okay.
extra training, it's what they do already. As well as including someone from the County Planning Commission, as well as what I'm proposing is one person appointed by each supervisor from each district, and then 2 additional at-large members, one from Carrollton DSD and one from Carsville. So we really do believe that, growth will hit there kind of next, so.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further
welcome.
questions? Thank you, ma'am. Good to have you with us.
Thank you
Take
for
care.
your accommodation, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is council comments. Any members of council have any comments? I've got one. Vice Mayor Butler and I are toiling away at Certified Planning Commissioner training up in Richmond for 2 days last week, and we've got probably, 1,000 pages to read between now and April that we're tested on regularly, so it's a good program. A lot of folks in there from the smallest town of Mineral, Virginia, which has got 456 in it, and I guess we have somebody from Manassas up there, I think so, some large Northern Virginia, so we're getting a mixture of the small, the large, and come to find out, most of them have the same type of issues they're dealing with, so it's a good program, and we'll go back up to complete that in April. So, anyone else on council have any comments? If not, we will move on to the consent agenda items. First item on the consent agenda, item C1, motion to authorize the town manager to enter into contract with Flock to implement Flock cameras in town of Smithfield. Mr. Collins.
Yes, I'd like to present this for approval. One second.
Okay. Item C2, appropriation resolution, relocation of water service, Red Point Heights. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is pertaining to some repairs and replacements and moving some lines, water lines in Red Point Heights. And thankfully, this was funded by ARPA at $127,000. I've really felt good that we've been able to do this with the help of these ARPA funds. So I'd like to see that move for approval.
Okay, you also have C3, sir.
Yes, sir. I have a motion to accept a proposal from A.C. Schultz for emergency repairs to well number 10 at the RO plant. This is one of those things where we really don't have a whole lot of choice. This well needs to be operating at its best capacity. The proposal was for $247,965, and we currently have $960,000, $849 in the water fund debt service account. So I'd like to move this for approval.
Thank you. Item C4, invoices over $20,000 requiring council action. Mr. Pack.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 invoices today that require authorization by council. The first is to Athens Building Corp. for the Windsor Castle Boardwalk renovation project. This is for $113,075.65. And since Finance Committee 2 weeks ago, we received a second invoice for the same group for the same thing as they have finished that bridge, $69,707.66. And then finally, we have a invoice here from the Flock Group for our Flock cameras, $33,750. And we would like to approve that invoice, assuming that we also approve the motion to enter into a contract with the Flock Group.
Thank you. Any questions by members of council on the consent agenda items? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Peck, seconded by Mr. Smith. Further discussion? Call the question, please, ma'am.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next is the action section. This is public. First one is public hearing, special use permit, 107 Institute Street. Ms. Tammy Clary.
Hi, yes, good evening. The applicant is seeking approval for a special use permit. This is in accordance with the Smithfield zoning ordinance, Article 3, HC 28. This is for a waiver of yard requirements in order to allow 0 side yard setbacks. The current building is non-conforming as it currently has a 0 side yard setback for the left-hand side of the property. The applicant is proposing a ramp on the front of the building that would allow ADA accessibility. It would have a 0 side yard setback on the left side and allow for a right side yard setback of approximately 3.78 feet. It would feature a rectangular planter with a brick wall and white vinyl fencing. During the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant also presented a second option that would include a chairlift and a slightly larger side yard setback of 5 feet 6 inches on the left-hand side. At the Tuesday, January 9th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, the application was favorably recommended to Town Council with the staff conditions. This application was also approved by the BHAR on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024. Positives of this application is it would allow the applicant to bring the existing non-conforming structure into compliance while providing this ADA accessibility. The negatives, it is not a by right use and does require an SUP for 0 lot line development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. Any questions by members of council for Ms. Clary? Thank you, Tammy. Seeing none, this is a public hearing. The matter is open to the public. Does anyone in the public wish to be heard on this issue? Anyone wish to be heard on this issue? Public hearing is now closed. The matter is before the council for discussion and action.
Mr. Mayor, I will add that the Planning Commission reviewed this, went over it, and felt that it was a very appropriate use of the building. Bob Clay ran his insurance company out of here. I've been back in town as an adult for 25 years now, and it's been closed since, and Bob Clay was a customer and has since passed. So it's nice to see a building downtown get reused again. Mr. Hall, who's doing this project, does good work in town. We recommended it for approval with very little concern. We also allowed Mr. Hall either design that he sees fit, as they were both appropriate for the use of the building.
Understood. Further comment? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the special use permit with provisions recommended by staff as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Pack. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Was that Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Gibbs. Further discussion? Call the question, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next public hearing is on the zoning ordinance text amendment. Ms. Tammy Clary.
Yes, good evening, thank you. The applicants are seeking approval for a proposed text amendment to the attached residential zoning district. They would like to construct 130 condo units. This would be at T-Pin 21A01511, which is the parcel behind the Royal Farms. These units would have 0 lot line dwellings, and they would also feature attached rear detached garages. Each lot would be approximately 34 feet by 91 feet and approximately 3,094 square feet, and feature approximately a 12-foot front yard setback. In order for the applicants to have a mechanism to bring this application for review and decision, the applicants are proposing a text amendment to Article 3 EI10A1. This is specifically for condominiums, and they would repeal Section 2, and Section 1 would read, all AR district provisions shall be met as if lot lines existed unless approved by special use permit. This would allow the applicants the ability to apply for the rezoning of the property to attached residential and seek potential approval for their proposed project. According to the definition of dwelling single-family attached, it does include 0 lot line dwellings. Currently, the zoning ordinance does treat condos the same as attached residential dwellings. This is in regard to setbacks, density, and yard requirements. The proposed text amendment would allow the applicant to apply for a special use permit to allow their proposed development. They would still be required to rezone the property, request a change to the future land use map, and request any additional special use permits or waivers that may be required. Staff have identified that at the very least this project would require an SUP to exceed maximum density, an SUP for a smaller lot width, an SUP for a waiver of parking and loading, as the applicants would not be providing RV parking, a planning commission waiver for open space, a rezoning to attached residential, and a future land use map amendment. This property was previously rezoned to MFR, which is our multifamily residential. This was to allow 15 10-plex buildings at 150 units. This application was favorably recommended 4-1 at the Tuesday, January 9th Planning Commission meeting. Positives, this text amendment would provide the applicants with a mechanism in order to proceed and apply for their proposed project. The negatives, the current zoning ordinance does not have a mechanism for this project to move forward. The applicants are proposing this text amendment to allow them to submit applications for the proposed 130 zero-lot line condo units. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Clary by members of council? Again, Ms. Clary, I think you mentioned it, but this simply is another tool in the toolbox, number one,
Correct. This would be applicable to any developer that could use this. Again, this would apply to condo units. It would allow them to apply for special use permits if they did not meet the requirements in the attached residential zoning district.
And this approach is not novel to Smithfield, is that correct? There are other localities close by that are utilizing this type
Correct.
of
So
approach?
the way that our zoning ordinance is set up is we treat condominiums the same as attached residential in regard to density, setback, and yard requirements. Our zoning ordinance just defers back to the AR. This allows developers that are coming in with a proposed development of condominium units to craft their project, again, not having to comply with the attached residential requirements of the AR. They would then have to apply for a special use permit in order to craft it into this condominium style that doesn't traditionally fit with traditional attached residential dwellings.
A number of different SUPs as you just related to, correct?
Yes, sir.
High hurdle, high bar?
Again, this is just what we've identified at this stage. Anything that doesn't comply with the attached residential, this text amendment would allow them to apply for an SUP in order to make that application.
I just want to make it clear, because I think I mentioned it before, that just because I may support this does not, or should not be inferred or implied that myself or whatever would necessarily do anything approve or deny. This is simply, as I said before, and I'll say again, it's another tool in the toolbox as far as planning commission is concerned. So my comments. Any further comments by members of council?
I do have a question,
Yes, ma'am.
Tammy. The text amendment is to allow for the detached condominiums, correct?
So the text amendment is to allow the applicant a mechanism to bring a proposed project. Right now, the way that the AR, they must meet the density, the setbacks. By repealing Section 2 and including it in Section 1, stating all AR district provisions shall be met as if lot lines existed unless approved by special use permit. That way, if their application does not comply with the provisions of the attached residential zoning district, they have the option to apply for a special use permit. For example, they are proposing a smaller lot width than the requirements in the attached residential. That would be a special use permit item if this text amendment was approved, that they would then be able to apply for in order to produce this application with this condominium unit featuring a 34-foot width lot.
Further question?
The text amendment that we have, is that reasonable for the type of project that he wants to submit? This developer wants to submit?
This would be applicable to any developer. This text amendment, as proposed by the applicants, would allow them a mechanism to bring their project forward.
Only via a special use permit?
Currently, there is not. Currently, their project does not comply with the attached residential. It really doesn't fit with any of the zoning districts that we have in our zoning ordinance, and they are not able to bring forward an application. They are proposing this text amendment so that they can then bring forward a complete application requesting the rezoning and any additional special use permits that they would then need.
Okay, I guess that's what my question is. Is that reasonable? We're doing a text amendment for a new type of project. Well, and it doesn't even matter who the developer is. It's a new type of project that we don't have the capability of allowing a developer to submit an application. Okay, so we're doing a text amendment, but in addition to that, the other ordinances or zoning requirements that go along with a detached condo, we're not changing those. We are using attached residential, and if it's this type of project, that anything else has to be a special use permit.
That is correct.
Okay.
If they don't comply with it, then yes, this text amendment allows them to apply for additional special use permits in order to bring their project forward.
Them or any other developer as
That-
well, once it's signed, correct?
That is
We'll make sure
any
that's-
applicant.
We'll make sure that's clear too, because this is not just for this developer.
Well,
This
and
is-
I'm not asking
No, no.
specifically for this
Just for
developer.
everybody, I'm not, just
Okay.
for everybody to know.
Ms. Butler, this, we currently don't have a avenue for this particular product in our town,
Right,
okay? And so what they've asked is that we give them an avenue to apply. And that's all that the vote is on tonight, is an avenue to apply. And so some of the comments I've heard is like, well, why don't you have an avenue for this? Is this something the town doesn't want? You can't write your zoning ordinances that encompass everything. You know, as building changes, as design changes, as public change, we have to be able to adapt our zoning ordinances to some things that we
do.
consider to be reasonable. So if we feel this is a reasonable change in our zoning ordinance to allow it to come forward, not to vote on the project at all, but to allow it to come forward, then we should change it. If we don't feel that way, we should not allow it, and we keep it the way that it is.
well, and Rand, is Councilman Pack, that's why I asked that question, but I will tell you that the response that you've given me is one of the things that I did learn in class last week. But, you know, it's the perception of it too. Hypothetically, if the developer comes along, we approve the text amendment, and let's say Planning Commission likes it, and you all decide, okay, you approve the special use permits, then the perception in the community is that we did it to allow it. And special use permits are not out of the ordinary where development is concerned. But I do know where the Grange project was concerned, it was a negative connotation with that. So that was why I asked that question.
Well, you know, special use permits tend to carry a negative connotation because you're making an exception to the rule. But from a planning and zoning standpoint, they're a wonderful tool because we just passed a regulation that says you can't have a vape shop in certain districts in town without a special use permit. We can't just ban vape shops. It's a legal profession, and we can now say that with the vape shop, you can only be there by special use, and you have to make the case as why it's gonna be there. And then we can put stipulations like, yeah, you can have a vape shop, but it's gotta be a purple vape shop. I mean, that's kind of arbitrary, but the point is that you can, special use permits are really a nice tool for the planning commission to use, because you have some control over what happens in the community and what doesn't happen in certain circumstances. So if we were to make this text amendment and we approve it, and then a developer or this developer or any developer comes forward and meets all the requirements of the zoning ordinance without a special use permit, which is possible, it would be passed almost by right at that point. So special use permits, you're right, they do have a negative connotation, people look at them that way, but really when you break them down, they're not really negative. It's a tool that really allows some control over what happens in your community.
Okay.
Further questions of Ms. Clary at this time? Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Tammy. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public wish to be heard on this matter?
There are no signups.
Ma'am?
There are no signups.
Okay, thank you. Check in anyway. Okay, thank you. Public hearing is now closed. The matter is before the town council for comment and action.
I have just one comment to start
Mr.
off
Pack.
with. In the ordinance, if it were to be approved tonight that Mr. Riddick sent to us, the second paragraph says, whereas the town's planning commission after public hearing has unanimously recommended the town council adopt this.
It wasn't unanimous.
It wasn't unanimous.
No, that's right.
It was 4-1.
That's right.
Charles Bryan objected to this last.
We'll strike unanimous.
So, yeah, I just want to clarify that before we move forward with this.
Further comment? Questions? Matters before the council for action.
So in the report, Mayor, so staff have identified that the project will, at the very least, requires the following. So there's like 7 hurdles there, even with this being approved, correct?
That's what Ms. Clary said. That is if and when this comes back around to us.
Okay. All right.
Correct, Tammy? I think it was 7 different items you mentioned.
And these
I
are
think I
just the
counted
one.
them correctly.
And these are just the ones that are identified now?
Correct.
Okay.
And the
And you
developer,
would know as good as anybody that's even on the planning commission, so yes, sir.
and the developer has these, you know, they haven't submitted a plan, but Tammy's looked at the plan and said, hey, here's 7 items that I see that are an issue. So the developer hasn't submitted, so it is possible the developer corrects all 7 of those issues and brings you a plan without the requirement of those. But again, we don't know because it hasn't been presented, and he cannot present it at this point.
Yes.
Further comments, questions? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we, what was the appropriate motion here? That we approve the zoning ordinance text amendment, striking unanimously and writing 4-1, as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Pack, seconded by Mr. Collins. Further discussion by members of the council. There hearing none, call the question.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Nah.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is public hearing, real estate tax. Mr. Riddick, Town Attorney.
As a result of the reassessment, there is a requirement that you have a public hearing to adopt a tax rate. The existing tax rate was 19 cents, and that rate exceeds the amount necessary to be tax neutral. So you're required to have a public hearing and adopt a new tax rate. The rate advertised in the newspaper is 17 cents per $100 of assessed value. You can adopt anything from 17 cents and lower. You can't adopt anything any higher than that because 17 cents was what was advertised. Y'all have had, and of course, Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Collins were not involved, but there have been copious discussions about the rate and what it should be and the reasons why it should be more and why it should be less. But that's a political decision and open for discussion.
Okay. I think it'd be appropriate this time that Mr. Stallings give comment on the matter.
Yes, sir. When the budget that has been adopted and is currently in place was adopted assuming a 14-cent rate. However, to make that work, it did take $413,000 in ARPA funds to balance the budget. I'd be remiss if I didn't push council to consider adopting a budget that does not require the use of ARPA funds to balance the budget, and that would be at 16 cents. 15 cents, we still use about 150,000. 16 gets us to where we don't have to tap into ARPA funds. Whatever rate is adopted, again, the budget's there for 14 cents. However, we're looking forward to next year, knowing that we're going to have to make some significant market adjustments, especially on the lower end of our pay scale as minimum wage changes, as well as the ever-increasing cost of doing business. I think we'll be looking for a source of additional funds if we stay at 14.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Stallings by members of council?
Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Collins.
So we talked about, you said the ARPA funds were planned in last year. So when did the ARPA funds expire? When are ARPA funds no longer there?
We currently still have about $1.3 million in ARPA funds that we have not obligated to projects. Because we received less than $10 million, we were able to claim all $8.8 million of ours as lost revenue. So the timelines that were hard and fast on the original ARPA legislation, we've complied with those. We are good to go. We are still generally following those guidelines as far as what uses we are using the money for. But right now, there is no cutoff where that we would have to return funds or anything of that nature. But we do have about 1.3 million left we have not obligated.
But they were not earned funds, they were,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if gifted is the right
grant
word,
funds,
but they're
if you will.
grant funds.
Yes, sir.
So when that's over, that's a hole in the budget.
Right,
That
it's
can't be
ultimately
filled.
borrowing from the savings account to
Right,
balance the
right,
budget.
okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, thank you.
And that $413,000 number was based off of some capital items that were in the budget. However, we always have capital expenditures. I mean, every year we're going to have capital expenditures in the budget. So it's those particular expenditures may be gone at the end of the year, however, but there'll be something that some other need that fills it for
I have a question. So the 16%
Gibbs.
would allow pay raises, right?
The adopted budget included a 6.2% pay raise that went into effect last July.
Okay.
That was factored into that using that 413,000. So any rate you adopt at this point in time, as long as it's not less than 14, funds our budget.
Okay,
It's just
great.
next year that, again, we'll be up against that pretty soon.
Further questions of Mr. Stallings?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith?
Michael, the CIP money that's in there now, that's not new money, is it? That's money from leftover projects, is that correct? That still needs to be completed?
There are quite a few projects in our CIP that were last year's projects, and when we were doing budget development, a lot of them just came out to make the numbers right. So there are CIP projects that are still there from previous years.
Okay.
Yes.
Further questions of Mr. Stallings? All right, this is a public hearing. No one signed up for this either.
No.
But I will offer the opportunity to the public who wish to be heard on the matter. There seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. The matter is before the council for discussion and then action.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Pack?
I have considerable discussion for this tonight. I've done quite a bit of work on this budget to get through. And so I'm going to kind of go through some of my notes here tonight. For starters, the budget was presented with a 14-cent tax rate. Okay, that's a budget we built. That's a budget we decided we're going to make. And with a 14-cent tax rate, it does fall short on revenue side of $413,344, and we're having to make that up in some manner. And we had chosen ARPA funds, so you either take from ARPA funds or your reserves or whatever else. But we had a budget of $10,257,000, $10,257,706 to be exact. In that budget, we did include a 6.2% increase to all employees with a minimum of $1,000 salary increase to all of our employees. We included the completion of the implementation of our salary study. If you remember last year, there were several that we didn't fully implement, and we finished implementing that this year. We provided for 2 new positions, full-time public works position and a part-time town manager office position. We had $50,000 in the budget allocated to fund the implementation of the town council vision from the visioning session we had. $30,000 allocated to our new website. We had some increase in R&M here at the Smithfield Center from $118,500 to $118,500 from $45,000, and I make that point to show that we're continuing to keep up with our infrastructure, continuing to keep up with our buildings through that, and that's important that we do that in town. We budgeted $91,036 in contingency funds. Those are for funds, things that we didn't think of in the budget. We have almost $100,000 for it. This year we have a large repairs and maintenance to our public buildings of $413,344, which is new windows for Town Hall. Interestingly, that number matches identical with what our shortfall is, right? This particular budget line item over the last 2 years has averaged $67,000. So we're increasing it quite a bit this year. And Mr. Stallings is right. We have capital improvement needs throughout the town. Fortunately, with ARPA, it's got us way ahead on our CIP stuff. And so, as I was kind of going through this, I wanted to go back to we were just recently audited. Okay, we got a very good grade on our audit. Ms. Roundtree just said the county had a few issues. We were fortunate we did not have any issues. So just from the management discussion and analysis portion of the audit, I'll read you 3 points that they made. Last year, the town's total net position increased $4.3 million, of which governmental activities accounted for an increase of $2.7 million, and business type activities accounted for an increase of $1.6 million. That's a huge increase year over year. More importantly, though, the total ending fund balance for the town's government's fund is $13 million, which is an increase of $2 million over the prior year. The ending fund balance of the general fund was $12.7 million, is equal to 128% of the town's fiscal year 2023 general fund expenditures. So in the bank, our backup money, we have 128%. So in theory, we could put the tax rate at 0 and last for another 1.25 years without bringing any taxes in. We're not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. But it does give us a huge safety net. And that's one of the points that I'm making, is that we have a large reserve. And we're doing really good things with it now. We're doing different types of investments with it. And it's nice to be cash flush in our community. We could borrow a lot more money than what we are. Our unassigned fund balance for the general fund was $12 million, or 138% of the general fund expenditure, less any capital outlay expenditures. These are not me making it up. This is what the audit, this is what Cleaver Cox Farmer came and told us. So these are good fundings. So as we go through this, when we look at this, I'm going to make the case, and you guys take it if you like it or not, that we don't need a whole lot more rainy day funds. We don't need a whole lot more in reserves. We have plenty in reserves. And so if we look at this and we're to do a revenue neutral tax, going from 19 cents, that number would be 14.8 cents would be our revenue neutral. That's what the real estate dollars works. And I don't think the 14.8 cents makes sense to have as your tax rate. I am proposing, or I am recommending a 15-cent tax rate. With a 15-cent tax rate, we would need $153,212 to balance our budget. I propose that money does come out of ARPA funds. And I understand everybody's argument that ARPA funds are a terrible way to balance your budget. And I agree. If we were funding salaries with ARPA funds, it's not sustainable. If we were funding general operations, it's not sustainable. But the way I look at it is we're funding the windows in Town Hall. It's a CIP project. We have done many, many CIP projects with ARPA funds. A lot of the bridge work we just completed at Windsor Castle was done with ARPA funds. It's appropriate use of the money. And we're very blessed to have it. Anything above that would put excess revenue into our budget. I really like the way that Michael does his budgeting. It's the way that I do budgeting. He keeps his revenues low and his expenses high. That's one of the reasons that this town is in good financial state. If we look at the budget the way it's written, there has been no increase in meals tax year over year. Our meals tax is very quickly growing to become as much as our real estate tax, our personal property taxes. It's a huge number for us. And I will tell you that in fiscal 19 and 20 to fiscal 20 year 21, there's a 12% growth in our meals tax in actual. And then from 21 to 22, there's another 11% growth in our meals tax. So if we budgeted for that with just 11% growth this year, we're going to see an extra $250,000 in revenue that we had not even planned for. So if that in fact does come to fruition, we may not have to have the ARPA money. We've balanced our budget almost every year that I can remember being on this town council, which this is my 12th budget cycle, with reserves or some other mechanism, but we never use it. Our revenues tend to catch up. We don't expend all of our money. The police department in many years has returned money because we're budgeting for officers that we haven't even been able to get. Unfortunately, I mean, we have to budget them so that we can have them, but we're generally 3 officers short. There's big savings there. So when we look forward with this, yeah, Michael's right. We may need next year to increase our taxes. We may need to increase taxes the year after that. But because we have so much reserve today, I don't think it makes fiscal sense to our constituents to prepare today for what may happen next year. We're getting ready to go into budget cycle. It's February. We generally start budget in March and April. So we'll know this very quickly as we prepare next year's budget. And we may have to look at raising taxes for that. But for this year, I think we need to bring our taxes to 15 cents, which is still a slight increase from 14.8. And I think that we'll just fund the shortfall if it comes up for the capital improvement project out of our ARPA funds. I know I threw a lot of numbers at you guys, but I've looked over this. I've looked through the budget. It's all sitting right here. But we're in a good position, and I feel very comfortable. If the town were my company, and that's the way that I look at it from the finance piece. If my town was my company, I'd feel very comfortable with what I presented to you guys today. So any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But those are my 2 cents. I mean, I recommend 15 cents. I think it's a safe number for us, and if we need more in the future, then we go down that road in July.
Any questions by members of council for the Chair of the Finance Committee, Mr. Pack?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Collins?
One question is, I know the budget was planned for 16 cents,
14.
or 14 cents, sorry, 14 cents, but then, Michael, you said 16 cents was where you were looking.
16 is the first place where we don't have to pull from reserves.
So,
to balance.
so that's the only difference between going from 15 to 16 is the amount to pull. And like you said, I think,
Right.
Mr. Pack, you said it perfectly, that, you know, if revenues are usually, you know, planned to be lower, which is a prudent thing to do, and they're a little bit higher, then there may not be any need to pull anything next year.
Perhaps.
So at 15 cents, well, yeah, perhaps, exactly. So at 15 cents, is that, so is that neutral to the constituents as far as their taxes, or is it?
14.8.
0.2% more?
14.8 is the actual neutral number.
Okay.
That's your true neutral number. So rather than doing a 14.8 cent tax,
Yep.
I recommend
So
a 15.
0.2% of their new assessed value from 2023
Correct.
is what the tax change will be?
Correct.
Okay.
And at 15 cents, we're still short on our budget. We're short $153,212.59.
But
But I think we'll make it up.
exactly.
And if not, we'll fund it out of
history does show
ARPA.
that Smithfield typically does.
It does.
And if not, ARPA, I don't like depending on something that was a grant money because it's just not prudent planning, but it's a lower value, and if the revenues are planned to be lower next year, if they do neutral out or raise a little bit, then you don't have to get any
Correct.
from anyone else.
And Mr. Collins, the only reason I use ARPA funds, because normally this would be reserves. If you look at
Good point.
back, at our back budgets, it's reserve funded. We've had budgets that were $2 million short that we've funded our reserves and still wound up
That
to
makes
the
a big
good.
difference to me. Yeah, okay, that makes a big difference. Yeah.
The only reason I suggest ARPA is because it is a capital improvement, a one-time capital improvement to the town hall building to replace windows. If it were to fund salaries or anything along the other lines, you either fund out of reserves or you make this budget, 16
Okay,
cents.
Good, okay. Thank you.
Further comments?
16 cent give us a balanced budget, correct?
All options give us a balanced budget. It's just a matter of where the revenue comes from.
So the
to
ARPA
balance.
funds, okay,
Right. 16 is the first time that I didn't balance the budget on ARPA funds.
okay.
And the expenses don't change regardless of the tax rate. It's just the revenue piece that does.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Mr. Smith?
Not necessarily a question, but I know I have discussed this and talked about it since end of June last year. And at that time, I was requesting the 17 cents. However, a little snafu about trying to get some things done. We couldn't publicize this in the right manner, so we had to back up a little bit. So at that time, I spoke about the 17 cents. It was basically because of what Michael talks about in the future. I'm like Randy, I've been sitting here the same way for 12 years, and I see, it seems like every year, sometimes we get down to really tight numbers, and we're cutting $500 or $2,000 from something, trying to get to that point. And I agree with the funds. We are finally, this extra money we're investing in and making money for us, which has been a huge improvement over the past. I see the future being bright for Smithfield, always have, but I also see we can't hold people accountable for continued low salaries and expect that they're gonna be staying here. I think it's an insult. I've gone through major increases in my employees' salaries as a result in the last year or two, and it's staggering. I don't think we can compete as a town with just getting by. I can live with the 16 cent. I'd like to see the 17, but I think 16 allows us not to use that ARPA fund money, and we've got plenty of projects coming down the pike that I feel that are important that we could use the ARPA funds. And once again, it's gonna disappear sooner or later. I'm realistic. I've talked to people in the town, and they are not opposed to the 17 or 16% cents rate. So with that being said, I feel like we need to really consider this as a 16 and move forward if at all possible.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Collins, you have?
A quick question on what you just said. So, but the value doesn't relate back to the salaries that you're talking with the raises. Because that's becoming important. As I'm getting educated and everything, the salaries, I agree with you, are extremely low in Smithfield for the public service that these people do. But that has no bearing on this conversation, right?
Not on this year.
Those
No.
raises, right, so those raises are gonna be there no matter what, whether we go to 15, 16, or 17.
It's just how we accomplish it moving forward.
Okay, and then the other question is, silly question, but next year we address this
Not a
again,
silly
correct?
question. Go ahead.
So next year we address this again, so we're really only looking at a one-year window right now, and does it make sense to go to 17 this year? If next year we're gonna look at the numbers again, and if we get through this budget cycle, and like you're saying, that the revenues do increase, and it does somewhat balance out better than having to take it from reserves or ARPA or whatever, then we can look at it, and it was a decision well made. If not, then next year we will readdress this again, and whether we need to increase it more or not, correct? Is that, okay?
Yeah, we're confronted with it's one of those things that anyone in politics does not like to be confronted with. And that deals with what will we do today, and then, are we gonna raise taxes again?
Yeah.
And raise taxes again, and and what, I've always believed, to an extent, right, wrong, or indifferent, that the public has a right of expectation to know what they're gonna be confronted with as best certainty as we possibly can in a decision-making forum. That, I don't like raising taxes because I know what it does to my pocketbook as well. The other thing, if I may, what does concern me is, if you look at the General Assembly, they're moving, or have been moving, and regardless of how you read the tea leaves, whether it passes, whether it doesn't pass, they're looking at a minimum wage of $15 an hour. We've got Public Works, Ashley, you correct me if I'm wrong, or Michael, we have Public Works that are out there working pretty hard that are at, what, $12 an hour?
We're $12.50 is our minimum right now.
That's
We're
true.
in the process of drafting 15 for next year.
That's what concerns me, and Mr. Pack, gosh, I hope you stay around forever, because when you go to distill those numbers, you do a wonderful job. My only concern is, my primary concern is, having managed in the public sector, is that, just to flip what you said, we are doing very, very well as far as our cash balance is concerned. If you're the public employee that knows that we're doing so well, how do you justify to them a $12.50 salary to work out in the elements that they do and stuff like that? I mean, and I don't mean to be complicated. I'm just saying that it always seemed to me that when budgets were done at the end of the program, they were always ultimately balanced on the backside of the employee. You promised the raise, you promised this. I can remember when I went to work for the state police, I had a sheet. Step 1, grade 1, boom, boom, boom. You could look at that sheet, you could know what you'd be making in 15 years, so you could plan, well, in 10 years, I can probably afford a house. That sheet lasted about 6 months, and it always has. And I understand that tough decisions have to be made, but as long as we can understand that we need to keep up, as Mr. Smith said, with what needs to be done, I think our employees are underpaid to an extent. Some not, some are. But Public Works specifically, that are out there doing the hard labor and keeping the water running and the stuff flowing. And I know it's just part of where I come from. I have I guess a soft spot in my heart, which as a politician you're not supposed to have at times, but I do as far as the employees are concerned. And I'd like to see us, as a town of Smithfield, be proud of what we pay our employees, have them be proud to work for Smithfield and know that they're justly compensated. And that's my concern. How we get there, we can continue to look. And as you said, I appreciate your stance that you're not hard and firm that, this is the way it is, boom, 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 we're not going to move or whatever. But I'd like to to make sure that we pay those employees what they deserve.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect.
Mr. Pack,
Yes.
please.
This budget that we're setting the rate for now did include a 6.2% increase. It did make sure that there was a minimum of $1,000, and it was a completion of the implementation of the salary study that was done the year prior. 15 cents, 16 cents, 17 cents, whatever we decide tonight, does not change what they are raised. Your point is well received, as is Mr. Smith's. Point being, though, is that we start that for this next budget cycle, and those arguments should be made for the budget.
And we're on the same
Yeah.
sheet of music. I just want to set the table that when we start having those discussions as far as the employees are concerned, that we're all open to that consideration as far as that's concerned, because, you know, what they do and how they do it, and y'all will certainly be going on an orientation tour, which will open your eyes as to what our departments do, not just Public Works, but everyone.
started
Some of the things that that they do for the pay that they make, it's, I have a hard time with it, quite honestly. But, anyway, I've also learned in Planning Commission that as the chairman or the mayor, I'm not supposed to have so much input as far as influence is concerned. So with that, I will quiet down, and open up the floor.
So I visited Park and
I
Rec.
like- oh, okay.
Go, Vice Mayor.
Madam Vice Mayor?
I'm inclined, Randy, I understand, you know, your explanation. You know, and it's really ironic, you know, to put things in perspective, you know, we're talking about our budget for current year, which this current year is almost over with. But my long goal is to agree with Mike. I'd like to have some consistency as well. Yes, it doesn't matter what the tax rate is for this budget year, but I hate to see us having the same conversation again next year, because I would think that the citizens want some consistency. This year, our rate is 14 cents. Next year, it may be 16 cents. You know, why not make it 16 cents this year? You know, it's revenue neutral. We don't have to use any ARPA funding to budget the, to balance the budget. And hopefully 16 cents will get us where we need to be with staffing and appropriate raises next year.
I'll answer that for you.
Okay?
The reason is, last year, we put $2 million back into our reserves based on what we put. We could have budgeted that $2 million for raises if that's what we wanted to. So all we would be doing this year is not raising, but continue to put additional funding at taxpayer expense into reserve.
Okay, so based on what you're saying, if we decide on 15 cents, what you're recommending.
Yes, ma'am.
So we can give staffing the appropriate raises that they need next year without any additional increase.
No, we don't know what next year's gonna bring. What I'm saying is that this year's already set up, is already done. We may have to raise taxes next year.
Since I've been on town council, I don't remember, well, the last 4 or 5 years, when is the last time we've had an increase? You know, it currently is at 19 cents.
2019 was 16 cents, 2020 was 19 cents. So 1920.
2019 and 20, we did a raise, a tax raise, increase.
So I'm still fixated on the 16 cents. And when we talked about it last time, I was at 17 cents. 16 cents sounds revenue neutral to me.
But revenue neutral is 14.8. That's what the math says.
15 cents. Revenue
ma'am.
neutral, is that without adding or pulling additional funding from somewhere?
No, there's a difference between revenue neutral and a budget that's not balanced out of reserves. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Reddick?
can I explain? You're conflating budgeting and taxes, and you can't do that. The law, because of the reassessment, the law requires you to look at your tax rate and determine what would the rate be that would generate the same amount of revenue with the new assessment, and that rate would be 14.8%. So based on everybody's tax bill, well, not everybody, because it's just, but the average tax bill that goes out, if you send it out at 14.8 cents, everybody would theoretically pay the same tax bill they paid last year. 14.8 cents. We are at 19. So you have to make it, you've advertised 17 because there was discussions, Mr. Smith, there was, back in the fall, there was discussions after the budget was being adopted that 17 would be perhaps the high that everybody considered. So it's been advertised at 17. Your budget is based on 14. But you're talking revenue just to fund this year's budget. It has nothing to do with salaries, it has nothing to do with next year. What is the rate, and Mr. Pack's point, I think, is that at 15%, I don't think anybody would recommend 14.8% because it's a nightmare for your treasurer. So you should pick, we have done 0.5% many years ago, and it was a disaster. It's very difficult for the treasurer's office. But you can, if you want to adopt a fractional rate, you can. But what Mr. Pack is saying is that if 14.8 is revenue neutral, he's recommending 15 because it's the closest thing to revenue neutral that he's talking about. It still would, it has nothing to do with your salaries, it has nothing to do with anything, because that money is already appropriated in your budget. You're gonna pay those salaries just as they've been approved in your budget. But don't conflate this year's budget and the tax rate. This is just a function of how much money is gonna come in the door this year, because she's gotta send the tax bills out in April. And so if you adopt it at 15, you're gonna get about the same amount of money you got last year. Not taking into consideration any growth, but people are gonna pay the same taxes this year that they paid last year when they get their bill. And that's a general, because some people's assessments went up more than others and that sort of thing. But just the average assessment will lead to the same tax bill. If you adopt 16, there's gonna be more money that comes in the door. 17, there's gonna be more money that comes in the door, and it's gonna go into your reserves because your budget is funded at 14 cents, but it's funded with ARPA money. And what Michael's saying is, if you give me 16 cents, I will not have to draw on the ARPA money to make up the difference. And what Randy's saying is, given the history that we have, and this is entirely true, we're probably going to generate more revenue this year than we budgeted because Michael's been very conservative in his income projections.
Yep.
So, but you cannot conflate budget and tax rate. It's purely this is purely a decision about income that's going to come in the door when the tax bills go out in the spring due June 5th.
But I would argue 2 points. Number one, you do have to consider ultimately, as far as your budget is concerned, how much money you're going to utilize as far as to satisfy what that ultimate end dollar budget's going to be. The other thing is, although I understand the revenue neutral aspect of it, which would be 14.8% or whatever, but isn't there an exception that if you have a certain rationale that you need X number of more dollars, you can make it more?
Sure you can.
Than that. Okay, I just want to make sure.
No, you can make it, tonight you can adopt up to
Up to
17
17 cents,
because that's
right.
what you advertised.
But my point, I guess, just to maybe bring it back around is that, to your point, I understand we're in this instant moment. Yeah, I get that. But there's gonna come a time where we're gonna be out of this window, and what do we do? Do we just go ahead and remain in this window right now, and then the next time we come around and raise taxes? Or do we go ahead and do it now? And again, the ARPA money is also concerning me as well. So that's my point.
It's purely, there's no limitations on what you can do other than what you can come to an agreement on. And you have to have a 2/3 vote. So it can't be 3 to 4. You've got to have 5 votes tonight.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Collins?
Real quick. So, not conflating the two, like, I see where you're going with that, but don't they get conflated in the theory that if you separate the tax rate out from the budget, then very technically, we had a deficit in our budget last year that was filled by ARPA. So there was an increase of funds needed to come from somewhere, correct?
Last year's deficit, yes.
Deficit.
Was funded with reserve money.
Right, with reserve money. So don't they have to be conflated in a sense that the tax rate does go with the income or the revenue earned, to where if you just go to a revenue neutral standpoint, then we're approving a deficit budget if everything stayed the same from last year. Correct?
Right.
If you don't,
And that's
yeah.
ultimately a policy question for the seven of you on how do you balance that between the tax burden versus using reserves? I mean, that's a policy question that the seven of you have to wrestle with.
And the part I'm having is just that part, because if history says that the reserves are usually there, and your revenue is so, is well underestimated that it doesn't make it up, that does create a little bit of confusion in my mind, because I agree with the 16 cents. I love the idea of the 16 cents. That makes sense to me, because, I balance budgets in my life for companies and everything all my life. So that just makes sense to me, not having to depend on somewhere else. The 17, I love that because it does plan a little better. You do have that planning factor in there, and that is our job, is to plan for what we're guessing. But then having the revenue neutral makes sense, but going back to the budget or going back to the deficit, depending on history, does create an avenue for the revenue neutral argument, because it does make sense if history does support that. And next year, we won't be having this conversation, because it would be, once we get through the budget, it should work itself out.
The $2 million number that Councilman Pat referenced, I mean, that is made up of revenues that came in higher than we anticipated, as well as some projects that we put on the books and didn't complete or didn't do. So it's a combination of revenues coming in higher than projected and expenses being lower than projected. So it's a combination of both that leads to that. Some of those funds then get rolled over into the next year's budget because we have to complete projects. But so it's a combination of both.
Mr. Brooks? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gibbs?
So we advertised 19%,
We advertised
17%, 17%. Now we're at 16%, right? And so I visited Park and Recs, and I know what they make an hour for what they do. And I understand the budget is balanced regardless, right? But that 16%, if it allows us to give another raise next year, those guys work on Sundays, 12 hours sometimes. And so I'm not opposed to the 16%. I think we're in a good position. I mean, the budget's balanced either way, but the 16% is just more palatable to me. If it means that our employees are going to get a raise this year, with possibility of getting a raise next year. And I just think, and I talked to constituents, right, and no one opposed. It was like, I'm okay with the 16%, as long as you guys are fiscally responsible with it.
Mr. Gibbs, if you get 16 cents this year, it doesn't help our employees at all this year, at all. All it does is put more money in our coffer, which is great. I'm not disagreeing with anybody that says our employees need to be paid better. I have no argument against that whatsoever. But the revenue, making it 15, 16, or 17 this year, does not help that whatsoever. It does nothing for pay for our town employees. Zero. It doesn't help them at all. All it does is it puts more money in our coffers. My math says that a 16 cents increase, or which would be a tax increase, would give us a budget that applies roughly $260,000 to reserves. We'd have more money than we have expenses for. Is that roughly accurate, Michael?
That sounds right based off the numbers.
So if we raise it to 16 cents, based on what we have projected in this year's budget, we don't raise any additional over than what we have budgeted, but we put an additional $260,000 out of our taxpayers' pocket into the town's reserve fund. And that doesn't make sense to me. I have a hard time getting behind that. Now, if we want to get into budgeting for next year and we need to go to 16 cents because we want to give certain raises, okay, that's a great discussion to have. But that's not the discussion we're having tonight. 15 cents keeps us neutral. It doesn't cost our taxpayers anything extra. Our budget will balance or be really close to it. And if we take it to 16 cents, yeah, our budget balances, plus we put $260,000 into the bank. And that's at the cost to the taxpayer. That is everybody sitting up here and everybody sitting out there and everybody on the internet watching. they're gonna fund that $260,000 that I don't think we need. Not this year. Next year, absolutely, let's have that discussion. But that's not what the discussion's about
Mr.
tonight.
Collins, thank you.
So that's what it comes down to. Really, the salaries are off the table. Everything's off the table. It really comes down to 16 cents, zero comes out of reserves. Michael, you able to do everything at 16 cents, raising to 16 cents. 17 cents adds a little more in the reserves, 15 cents takes a little out. It really comes down to that discussion, right? Of what comes in or out of the reserves.
That's,
Whether it's
yes.
ARPA reserves or whatever you want to
Yep.
call it, it just, and then that reserve money that comes out, if we get extra, it's on the back of the taxpayers.
Correct.
Mayor,
Mr. Brooks,
I've been kind of quiet here.
that's what,
From day one, I was down to that 14, we started at 14, and we realized it was 14.8 that would make it net revenue neutral. And I've had many conversations with the folks here, one-on-one. But after listening to everybody, and Randy, you did a terrific job with the numbers, and I really do appreciate it. I'm inclined to go with the 16 cents as well. I've kind of changed my mind up from the 15. I certainly don't think that we can justify 17, but the 16 cents makes sense to me.
Chair will entertain a motion. Matters before council for either further discussion or action.
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion that we set the tax rate for this year at 15 cents.
Motion made by Mr. Pack at 15 cents. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion?
Yeah, I second it.
Second made by Mr. Collins. Further discussion? Call the question.
Vice Mayor Butler,
Nay.
Mr. Pack,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Nay.
Mr. Brooks,
No,
Mr. Gibbs,
Nay.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mayor Bowman.
No. 5-2. Motion fails by 2/3 majority. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we increase our number to 16 cents for a tax rate. Proceeding with that.
Motion made by Mr. Smith. There's a second to the motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gibbs. Further discussion? Call the question.
Vice Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Pack,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Brooks,
yes,
Mr. Gibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
No.
Mayor Bowman.
Yes.
5-2. Pass.
Motion passes 5-2. Thank you very much for a very good discussion. Next item on the agenda, public hearing. Note approval of town council's January 2nd, 2024 minutes. Mr. Riddick.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'll review the minutes and recommend they be approved as presented.
For questions of Mr. Riddick.
So
Call the
moved.
question. I'm sorry, again. Motion made by Mr. Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Collins. Further discussion? Call the question, please.
Mr. Brooks,
yes,
Mr. Gibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Pack,
Yes.
Mayor Bowman.
Yes. The next one are motions to fill unexpired and terms on, the first one is the nominating committee, which it consisted of Mr. Brooks and Mr. Smith. Recommendation to fill Michael Swecker's unexpired term on the planning commission. Who's going to handle that?
I'll take, do you want it?
Yeah, you go ahead. You go
Okay.
ahead.
Mr.
You've done
Brooks.
so much work on it. That's
Yep.
great.
All right, in fact, I'll take the next two following this, if you don't mind.
We'll take them one at a time, though, if we would,
You
please.
got it.
Thank
All
you.
right, so after several conversations with Councilman Smith and prospective candidates, he and I are prepared to recommend the following. In regards to the Planning Commission, we are recommending Gigi Smith for the open seat vacated by Michael Swecker.
Most everyone knows her, but just in case, I included a few points about her. She moved to Smithfield a little over 30 years ago. The last 20 have been in the historic district. She served on PC from 2000 till 2015 and as chairman for the last of those 7 years. She also served on BHAR for approximately 10 years. She's active in Smithfield Little Theater. She's a volunteer at COP, Christian Outreach. And finally, she worked as the administrator at the Smithfield Medical Center for roughly 10 years.
Any questions of Mr. Brooks on the nominating committee's deliberation?
I will
Mr.
say,
Smith?
something about this. Being on these nominating committees used to be easy. They're not easy anymore. It's, what I do like is that we've had a lot of people really want to be involved, and that makes me feel better about the town and people wanting to be part of the town other than just a citizen. So these decisions we don't take lightly anymore. We talk to these people, we try to get a good feel for them. It's not something we just willy-nilly make a decision about. So, and I can tell you the other two that we have on there also are the same way. It's a lot of work that was done in this.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Further questions, comments? Chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we appoint Gigi Smith to the position vacated by Michael Swecker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith.
For the record, that's Virginia Smith.
Yeah. Okay.
We need a roll call vote or just by voice?
We do roll call.
Call the question, please.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next is motion to reappoint the expiring term of Russell Hill on the Board of Historic and Architectural Review. Mr. Brooks?
Yes, sir. In regards to the BHAR, we're happy to recommend Russell Hill be reappointed to his expiring term. He's a licensed contractor and has served the town well.
Further comment? Chair will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Russell Hill to the Board of Historic and Architectural Review.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Brooks. Further discussion? Call the question, please, ma'am.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next is item 7 on the action section, motion to reappoint the expiring term of Gary Hess on the Board of Historic and Architectural Review.
Yes, sir. Also, in regards to BHAR, we are recommending that Lee Abbott Lehman to the expiring position vacated by Gary Hess. Most everyone knows Lee, but here's a little background on her as well. She and her husband moved to town in July of 2012. She joined Smithfield Rotary the same month and is a very active member and a 2-term past president of that organization. She's on the Finance Committee and a trustee at Christ Episcopal Church, volunteer coordinator for the Red Cross blood drives here in the Smithfield community. She's the resident of the Haverty House, aka the Flag House here in the Historic District. With everything she has going on, she's also working on her doctorate degree.
Questions of Mr. Brooks by members of council? Chair will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Lee Abbott to the Board of Historic and Architectural Review.
Motion made by Councilman Smith to appoint Ms. Abbott to the BR. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brooks. Further discussion? Call the question, please, ma'am.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman? Mayor Bowman?
Yes. I think that takes care of the action section.
Real quickly.
Sure.
With that said, I would like to introduce and have Virginia Smith and Lee Abbott please stand up, and congratulations.
Thank you so very much on behalf of council. We really appreciate your willingness to serve. We really, really do. Next item is new business, additional funding request for the Station Footbridge as part of the Windsor Castle Boardwalk Restoration Project. Mr. Stallings.
Yes, sir, and before we get started with that, Ms. Novak, we're going to show a video. We recently opened the Jericho Bridge that has been completely redone, and we wanted to show a quick video so you could see that work. And this is the contractor that's doing the work for us.
Hi there, I'm George Avgeros with Athens Building Corp., and I was the project manager on this bridge. And I want to take a moment and explain the wood products that we used here for sustainability and also for making sure it lasts. So this particular lumber is treated to level 4, which is the highest level treatment for human contact, meaning that it can be splashed by salt water, it has ground contact, all the insecticides are put into the treatment to keep it from insects and animals burrowing into it, but it also preserves it to the highest level that we can touch. It's not something you buy at a store, it's special order. The mill for this product is in North Carolina, and our treatment plant is here in Virginia off the Northern Neck, and they certify this product not only for its use, but also for all the UL labels and VDOT ratings, and it has a 15-year lifespan. So we're excited to be part of this project, and we're excited to be able to use the quality products that we still make in the state of Virginia.
All right. Well, what the
Next
world?
item on the agenda will be,
Oh, no! Back on social media.
Good job,
All right. So, that was George Avros, I think I said it right, from Athens Corporation, talking about the Jericho Footbridge project. And it looks great. Hopefully you've been out there to see it. So we had the bidders respond to just replacing what was damaged or getting ready to go. But after we got the bids back in, we decided, Kimberly Horn and staff, to go ahead and renovate the bridge in its entirety so we could get the spacing between the boards that we wanted. We could remove those cumbersome tow rails that we had that made it impossible to replace boards on our own. And then, of course, all the handrails needed replacing. So we decided to change the scope and move to doing bridges in their entirety. So Jericho Bridge is done, but it came in at 180. And so Station Bridge is longer and has the little outlook places for benches. And so it's estimated to cost us $206,000 for that bridge. We have the T-Mobile grant, but that still leaves us around $40,000 short. But I really think it's an important project for the park and the town, and it will greatly reduce the maintenance needs that these bridges are now currently demanding of our time.
questions of Ms. Novak by members of council?
The contractor said the new lumber is a expected 15-year lifespan. Is that what it?
Yes,
what I
sir.
heard?
Right.
Any other questions?
We,
Mr. Stallings?
we have a couple different places we can pull $40,000 from. You know, whether it be reserves, whether it be other ARPA money. We can also, there has been, the contractor has indicated they are going to do some sort of donation towards the project. We don't know what that is or what that looks like, but we do need to find about $40,000 to be able to completely rehab that bridge. So it's just discussion, direction.
I can't make a motion. One thing that Mr. Collins asked earlier about was ARPA funds.
Right.
You know, the way Congress works, you know, you don't know next week if they're gonna up and say, oh, guess what, all that ARPA money that you had could be gone. I mean, so,
And
just throwing that out there for what it's worth.
we can transfer the extra $40,000 onto this project. That would just take a motion from you guys to do that. But I agree, I think it was a great
Mr. Collins?
decision to do the bridges in entirety. I can only
Oh,
imagine how it
sure.
would look to have piecemealed it.
Mr. Collins has a question.
So how was the $40,000 arrived at? Was it, because did they bid separate, or did
So-
they bid one project, or is this a change order with the new wood rate? I mean, is this out of, I guess I'm looking for, is it out of scale what the original bid was?
No, sir. I changed the scope of the project. What we had the contractors bid on was replacing what was needed to be replaced on all bridges and piers inside the park. So that number came up to around 310,000. So when I changed direction and said, let's do bridges in its entirety, and it made it easier because you could close it and completely renovate it. So that's
So you
what's,
put the bid out as a, oh, got it.
we
The
did.
bridge was originally done on a linear foot basis.
Yes.
Okay,
And we had.
For
gone
just
and
what was
identified
bad.
boards, and so
But
when
as soon
we
as-
changed it,
Oh, yeah.
okay, perfect.
As soon as they would paint a board, that next board beside it would go the next day before we could even start the project, so.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a comment,
Mr. Pack?
and not in jest, but we did just come up with an extra $260,000 for our budget this year.
Just funded it.
It seems that we shouldn't have to take this from anywhere because we have more money than we anticipated having when we wrote the budget to start off with.
Well said.
That's called
So,
proper
so perhaps
planning.
we use money from the money we just approved.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we just did. I'm not trying to be facetious, but we now we have an extra $260,000 in our budget for this year.
Oh, my eye. It's a pleasure of the council. As I said, I can't make motions.
it would just be to approve a transfer of $40,000 funds to this project.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Pack to approve the transfer to this project of how many dollars?
40,000, please.
40,000. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gibbs. Further discussion? Call for the question, please, ma'am.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. Next is resolution to appropriate funds from scrap metal, sale of scrap metal, sewer fund operating budget.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Stallings.
Our public works folks throughout the year, as they do different projects, wind up with scrap metal, whether it's leftover pieces of pipe or debris they pick up out of the road. They recently sold what they had at the public works lot, and it generated $1,411.50. Historically, we have then put those funds back into one of the public utility funds so that they can use those for materials and supplies. In your packet was a resolution to appropriate a sum of $1,411.50 into the sewer fund operating budget.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Stallings by members of council?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Pack.
I would imagine in many localities that the departments aren't as thrifty or as thought forward to recycle their metals, right? I would like to take those $1,411.50 and do something for the department rather than putting it into the general fund. Is there an opportunity to do that?
Yes, sir. What the intent is they're going to replace tools with it, or at least that was the intent. They're in the process of trying to swap all of their battery-operated equipment out to one brand. That's what they had identified as the use for the money.
Okay. Yeah, well, I have no problem with that. So, I make the motion that we adopt a resolution to appropriate the funds from the sale of scrap metal to the 23-24 sewer fund operating budget.
Motion made by Mr. Pack. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Mr. Collins. Further discussion? Call the question, please, ma'am.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Vice Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mayor Bowman?
Yes. And I believe we have a C. Mr. Pack, you have under new business?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. If you guys, and Amy, if you guys will post this picture, I have a plat that's in front of all of council, and when it gets on the screen, I'll go over it. This is not for action tonight. This is for discussion and to bring back to committee. What you see here is a plat of the Mallory Scott Farm General Development Plan. The area that is circled in red in the top right there is roughly 5 acres that is not planned for development and abuts immediately up against Gatlin Point South. Mr. Napolitano reached out to me before the end of last year and asked if council would be interested in receiving this land from the developer at no cost. And the only stipulation he added to that is that this land not be counted against his open space, because there's roughly 5 acres here, in his development. And if we were willing to do that, they would give it to us at no cost. I thought that perhaps this property could be used for future uses of maybe a police station or a fire or rescue station or some sort of public use, perhaps just a park. So anyhow, I'm bringing this to council for consideration. The mayor is correct, and he asked me earlier to make sure we bring this back to committee. But I did want to bring this to your attention tonight, and obviously to the public was aware of it as well. But there is roughly 5 acres there that they would like to give back to the community. Of course, it is helpful to the developer. They wouldn't have to keep the grass cut. It wouldn't go against the HOA and things along those lines. That they would become the responsibility of the town until we develop it however we chose or not. So anyhow, I bring this to you guys for discussion and thoughts, and we can take it from here.
Any comments? And as I said with Mr. Pack, I think the appropriate thing to do, because there's a lot of other maybe potential considerations as far as what type of soil that we're dealing with, everything like that, that we really don't know right now. We give, a month or so for staff to do evaluation and see what we've got and things like that. So if there's no objection, I'd like to send this to Public Buildings and Welfare. I think that's probably the most appropriate place. And Mr. Peck, I appreciate you bringing it to us, because you could put fire stations somewhere, so if you had to do, or substation or something.
Whatever. We don't know what our future need is.
Right,
But
sure. Any objection to doing that?
Good idea.
Thank you, sir. It will be on Public Buildings and Welfare Committee next month if staff can get everything together. But just, if you would, just please report to Mr. Napolitano that, yeah, we're on.
I will. Are there any concerns that this council would like staff to look at specifically with regards to this property?
Yeah, I would like to see a percentage of the green space, how
The
it's
reduction
affecting
of
that.
that?
Yes.
Yep. Sure.
Yes, sir, we've already started working on some of that.
Any other new business to come before council? Is there any old business to come before
Yes,
council? Mr.
Mr. Mayor,
Collins?
there's one thing, we were talking about future and how things are, and the rules of the road usually come through the comprehensive plan and then strategic planning. And I know this council last year spent 2 days at the Windsor Castle and went through the strategic plan. I would like to bring that back up and say, where is it? What are the steps to get it adopted, get it formally approved and adopted, and have our roadmap put in place? I don't know what those steps are.
Well, let me throw this out. We did spend 2 days, and they were intensive days doing that. Was it 2 days? I just had back 2 days. I'm not so sure it's not time if we could. I know everybody's busy, but at least for because it's been a year now for us, and y'all were not involved in it at all. You were ultimately, because it went back through that way. So, but still, it's been so long. What about a half a day or 1 day work session or something we could do for that? Y'all, anybody object to that? I mean, how about Mike?
No, I think it's great.
I think it's a good idea.
What do you think you need, Michael? 1 day or half a day? Half a day you're shoving it down?
I think
1 day if we get out of there early, we're good?
Right, I think it's going to depend on how deep of a dive you want to go back into it. If it's just a review and minor tweaks, we might be able to do that in half a day. But if we plan for a full day and we're not there all day, then
And I don't want, for
That's a
Mr.
win.
Collins' benefit, us to just rush through it as a formality either. I
Okay.
think it should be plenty of time and,
Well, I read through it, and Michael gave me some notes, and there was a lot of thought, went through everything, and the notes were fantastic. So it brought me up to speed on, everything I was done in here. I do have some questions, but it wouldn't be like
Why don't we
like
just
a
plan on
like
the
dive
day?
back in.
Yeah, why don't we plan on a day and with lunch or something, we get finished, we can leave after lunch, or if we're not, we'll work right on through it.
I have a question in reference to that.
Yes,
I mean,
Madam Vice Mayor.
I've asked this several times. My question is, how much did Jim really see? Because there was a proponent to that staff was supposed to review and get back with us to let us know that what we've come up with, if it was really feasible. You know, I'd like to see us, where are we now, a year ago, based on what we put in place?
We are nowhere because it was never adopted.
So what would we be doing at this meeting? Going to, starting over again?
You would take what we drafted at that meeting and review it again, make sure everybody's still in consensus, and if so, adopt it. Staff had already done the work to develop the implementation plan. I've already got that. Nothing happened because the strategic plan was never adopted, so we didn't have anything to implement.
Well, can we see the staff's reports before we have this work session?
We can do that.
I think that's what you're asking for the most part, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't know staff had completed it. I haven't seen a copy of it.
Well, we had it, and it was slated to be reviewed by council after the strategic plan was adopted, because if council had changed the plan during adoption, then we would have had to go back and revise our implementation plan. But because the strategic plan never got adopted, we never brought an implementation plan to council, because there wasn't anything to implement.
It was your perception you didn't want the cart before the horse, right?
But we did do that work, so we do have a draft implementation plan based off the previously conceived strategic plan.
Well, Jim, you might be a step ahead of me.
I don't know.
I don't know if I saw
I
that.
don't think he saw that.
I don't know if I saw there
either.
were a bunch of notes
No,
from the
he
meeting.
received the reports that Ms. Sinclair
Yes.
put out after our, but no, that draft implementation plan stayed with staff.
Any other business come before council? There seeing none, meeting is adjourned.
Taking pictures before everybody leaves.
Oh, yeah. Don't leave.
Man, you sound like my grandmother.